What's up, everyone? Doodad Games with another UE4 C++ tutorial. In today's episode, we're just going to be doing setting up a simple camera in C++, and then after that, I will show you adding a spring arm and then a camera to the spring arm. So this is adding on to my first video. If you haven't seen that, you can check it out. It's not necessarily super important for this, but it might help you. So in Visual Studio, and I did get a comment on my first video that the font was maybe a little too small, so I did enlarge it. Hopefully it's enough. The first thing we'll need is two includes in our mypawn.h. The first is the camera/camera component.h, and then game framework/spring arm component. And if you're ever confused on, or you can't figure out what includes you need, it's usually in the UE4 documentation, which I will show you right here. And then, so once you have those two includes, just add a U property edit anywhere, U spring arm component, and a U camera component. For the first example, we're not going to use the spring arm component, but we will get to it, so you might as well set it up right now. In mypawn.cpp, just as in the first tutorial, set up our camera equals create default subobject U camera component and just name it our camera. And these three functions right here are all necessary. You can set the relative location, and the input is an F vector, and you can do a relative rotation with an F rotator, or you can do them both at the same time with set relative location and rotation with an F vector and F rotator accordingly. And what set relative location and rotation means is it's relative to whatever you're doing it's on its parent. So it will be relative to whatever our camera's parent is. Excuse me, I got caught up. And then just like last time, you just set up attachment to the root component. And that looks like this. It's just a camera, and when you click on a camera, you can always see what it's looking at. Now, cameras have a lot more functionality than I showed. I'm just setting up a basic one. I will leave the documentation in the bio of this video so that you can check that out if you need more functionality out of it. And you can move it around, and you can always see what it's looking at in the little viewport right here. And now we are going to attach a spring arm. I already have the code. I'm just going to uncomment it. And right here. Now, the difference between a camera and a spring arm is the spring arm will always keep the fixed distance that you choose unless a collision happens. And a regular camera does not care. So for this, I'm going to get rid of these. So for the spring arm, the same thing as we've always been doing is just create default subobject, use spring arm, and call it camera spring arm. And you are going to attach the spring arm to the root component. And the same thing goes for these. They're not all three necessary. None of them are really necessary, and you can do them both in one. I'm just keeping them here for example. And then the target arm length will be how far away you want, or how long you want this quote-unquote spring arm to be. And I have it as 400 units. Camera lag equals true will be sort of like a delay that I will show you, and it's easier to show you what the delay is. And then you can set the lag speed right here. And then instead of setting the camera attachment to the root component, you're now passing in the spring arm component, and spring arms have a default socket that is at the origin, and it's peaking up, and I will show you that. Sorry. So as I was saying, use spring arm component socket name. Spring arms have a default socket that if you look at the origin going outwards, the socket is here called socket name. And so that is where we are attaching our camera. And I was mentioning the camera lag, and if you move it around, you'll see that little delay. That is the camera lag. And one of the main differences between the camera and the spring arm, so if you collide this, it just goes through. But with the spring arm, it will, you see that? It jumped. It will always maintain that fixed distance unless a collision happens. So this is really ideal for a player character. So when you are really up close to, say, a wall or something, the camera will always be viewing the character. And maybe a static camera without a spring arm is better used for just an environmental camera, or just for a static viewport that you need. So that is pretty much it. And sockets can also have a lot more functionality, just like cameras. I will leave the documentation for that in the description as well. I believe next episode will be, or next video episode, whatever, will be some basic movement. And then after that will be maybe some more advanced movement. I also want to get into some collisions and some trigger events. But if you guys have anything in mind that you want to see or need help with something, please leave it in the comment. Other than that, I will catch you next time. Thanks, guys.